There is a peculiar notion in the world that a man without a woman by his side is somehow incomplete, that without romantic love his life is void of meaning. But I ask you, must a river beg for the ocean to find its course? Must the moon cry for the sun to shine? I stand before you today not to reject love, but to challenge the idea that it is the only path to fulfillment. There exists a kind of solitude that does not weaken a man, but strengthens him. It is in this solitude that one truly meets himself. To walk alone is not to be lonely, it is to be free, free from the endless expectations, the weight of seeking validation, the quiet compromises that chip away at one's spirit. In solitude, a man learns the art of self-mastery. He studies the world not through the narrow lens of desire, but through the vast expanse of curiosity. It is in silence that great minds forge their legacy. It is in the stillness of solitude that one can hear the whisper of purpose. Look to the greatest thinkers, the finest artists, the most disciplined warriors. Was their power born from attachment or from an unbreakable spirit? But let us not mistake solitude for isolation. A man without a girlfriend is not a man without love. Love takes many forms. It exists in deep friendships, in the pages of a book, in the melody of a symphony. It exists in the quiet moments of understanding between two souls who do not need to possess each other to connect. To be content with oneself is to be untouchable. The world may call you alone, but you will know the truth. You are not a man in waiting. You are a man in motion, carving your own path, unfettered by the need to be completed by another. And should love come, let it not be sought in desperation, but accepted in grace. Love should never be an escape from solitude, but a companion to it. Only then does it become real, unforced, unshaken by time. So, my friends, do not ask, why am I alone? Instead, ask, what can I become in this solitude? For therein lies the answer to a question far greater than love. The question of who you are. There is a peculiar notion in the world that a man without a woman by his side is somehow incomplete, that without romantic love his life is void of meaning. But I ask you, must a river beg for the ocean to find its course? Must the moon cry for the sun to shine? I stand before you today not to reject love, but to challenge the idea that it is the only path to fulfillment. There exists a kind of solitude that does not weaken a man but strengthens him. It is in this solitude that one truly meets himself. To walk alone is not to be lonely, it is to be free. Free from the endless expectations, the weight of seeking validation, the quiet compromises that chip away at one's spirit. In solitude, a man learns the art of self-mastery. He studies the world not through the narrow lens of desire, but through the vast expanse of curiosity. It is in silence that great minds forge their legacy. It is in the stillness of solitude that one can hear the whisper of purpose. Look to the greatest thinkers, the finest artists, the most disciplined warriors. Was their power born from attachment or from an unbreakable spirit? But let us not mistake solitude for isolation. A man without a girlfriend is not a man without love. Love takes many forms. It exists in deep friendships, in the pages of a book, in the melody of a symphony. It exists in the quiet moments of understanding between two souls who do not need to possess each other to connect. To be content with oneself is to be untouchable. The world may call you alone, but you will know the truth. You are not a man in waiting. You are a man in motion, carving your own path, unfettered by the need to be completed by another. And should love come, let it not be sought in desperation but accepted in grace. Love should never be an escape from solitude, but a companion to it. Only then does it become real, unforced, unshaken by time. There is a quiet dignity in a man who does not chase, who does not grasp, who does not seek completion outside himself. He does not run from solitude because he understands its value. He does not lament his single status because he recognizes the time it grants him, the time to think, to build, to master. He does not wake each morning burdened by the search for affection, but liberated by the endless possibilities before him. A man alone is not a man abandoned, he is a man with the world at his feet. He can sit in a cafe and watch the world move, unbothered by the need to impress. He can stand by the ocean and listen, not for someone else's words, but for the whispers of his own soul. He can walk into the unknown, not searching for someone to hold his hand, but searching for something greater: knowledge, wisdom, purpose. A man who understands the beauty of solitude is never truly alone. He carries with him the voices of history, the lessons of those who came before, the spirit of great minds who too walked the road less traveled. He knows that a relationship should never be the foundation of his existence, but rather a chapter in the great book of his life, a book that he alone must write. He is not bitter, nor is he resentful. He does not see women as adversaries, nor does he scoff at the idea of love. He simply does not make it the centerpiece of his being. He does not pine for something that is not yet his, nor does he let the world convince him that he is somehow lacking. He is not incomplete, because he was never missing a piece to begin with. There is a profound strength in a man who does not need to be needed. He is not driven by the validation of others, nor is he weakened by the absence of a partner. He understands that life is not a race to find love, but a journey to find oneself. And when a man truly finds himself, he realizes that love, if it is to come, must come naturally, freely, without force. The world will tell you otherwise. It will whisper in your ear that you must find someone, that time is running out, that happiness is reserved for those who share their lives with another. But I tell you this, happiness is not found in another person. It is found in the quiet confidence of knowing who you are. It is found in the mastery of your craft, in the depths of your passions, in the pursuit of something greater than fleeting romance. There is a reason why so many men, when left alone, fall into despair. They have been conditioned to believe that they are nothing without a relationship. They have not been taught the value of solitude. They have not been shown the power that lies in self-sufficiency. And so, when they find themselves alone, they mistake it for emptiness. They rush to fill the void, to grasp at anything that might distract them from the silence. But what they do not understand is that in that silence lies their greatest opportunity. The opportunity to grow, to reflect, to build a life that is full on its own. A man who embraces solitude is not a man who rejects love. He is simply a man who does not depend on it for his happiness. He does not fear being alone because he knows that in his aloneness he is free, free to explore, free to create, free to become the best version of himself. And if love should find him, it will not be because he searched for it desperately, but because he walked his path with purpose, and love simply found its way to him. The world belongs to those who do not wait for someone else to give them meaning. It belongs to those who rise each morning with fire in their hearts, who pursue their dreams without hesitation, who find joy not in the arms of another, but in the limitless potential of their own existence. To be a man without a girlfriend is not to be a man without worth. It is to be a man who knows that his worth is not determined by his relationship status, but by the strength of his character. It is to be a man who understands that love, if it is to come, should be a choice, not a necessity. It is to be a man who walks the road of life, not in search of someone to complete him, but in search of something far greater, his own destiny. And so I ask you, why fear solitude? Why dread the quiet moments? Why believe that a man must always have a partner by his side to be whole? The greatest stories in history were not written by those who clung to the familiar. They were written by those who dared to stand alone, to walk forward into the unknown, to embrace the solitude that so many run from. If you are alone, be at peace. If you walk without a partner, walk with purpose. Do not let the world convince you that you are less because you stand alone. Instead, let the world watch as you rise, not in search of love, but in search of the greatness that lies within you. A man who stands alone stands with the weight of his own choices. He is not swayed by fleeting emotions, nor is he desperate for validation. He does not measure his worth by the presence of another, nor does he allow society's expectations to dictate his path. He understands that solitude is not an affliction, but a gift, one that grants him the space to think, to build, to forge himself into something unshakable. There is a kind of power in a man who walks without seeking a hand to hold. It is the power of self-reliance, of knowing that his foundation is built not upon the shifting sands of romance, but upon the solid ground of his own will. He does not look to another to complete him, because he was never incomplete to begin with. He does not seek constant reassurance, because he has learned to trust himself. He does not fear solitude, because in it he has discovered something rare: peace. To be alone is not to be abandoned, it is to be unburdened. There is a vast difference between a man who is alone by force and a man who is alone by choice. The former laments his solitude, wishing for companionship to fill the spaces within him that he has not yet learned to fill himself. The latter walks with quiet certainty, knowing that the time he spends in solitude is time well spent. He is not waiting for love to give his life meaning. He is giving meaning to his life, regardless of whether love arrives or not. The world will try to convince him otherwise. It will tell him that success is measured by companionship, that a man who stands alone is a man who has failed. It will whisper to him that he is incomplete, that he must seek, chase, and grasp at affection, as though his very existence depends on it. But the man who understands himself, truly understands himself, will hear these whispers and smile, for he knows the truth. He knows that a life spent chasing external validation is a life half-lived. He knows that happiness is not found in another person, but in the depths of his own purpose. There is a certain grace in a man who does not depend on another for his happiness. He is not bitter, nor is he resentful. He does not look upon couples with envy, nor does he scoff at the idea of love. He simply does not make it the centerpiece of his existence. He does not pine for something that is not yet his, nor does he lament the absence of a partner. Instead, he moves forward, always forward, knowing that his path is his own to walk. It is in solitude that a man learns who he truly is. Without the distractions of constant companionship, he is left with nothing but himself, his thoughts, his fears, his dreams, and in this stillness he has a choice: to confront himself, to build himself, to become the man he was meant to be, or to distract himself with the endless search for external fulfillment. The man who embraces solitude chooses the former. He does not run from his own mind, he masters it. And what of love? Should it come, it will come not as a desperate search, but as a natural meeting of two complete individuals. A man who is whole within himself does not enter a relationship out of need but out of choice. He does not cling to another for fear of loneliness, but instead welcomes love as a complement to his already fulfilled existence. He is not afraid to walk away from what does not serve him, for he knows that his solitude is not a prison, it is a sanctuary. A man who understands the power of solitude is a man who moves through life with a quiet confidence. He does not beg for attention, nor does he seek to be validated by the affections of another. He is content within himself, and that contentment radiates outward. He is not desperate, and that makes him desirable. He does not chase, and that makes him intriguing. He does not depend, and that makes him powerful. And yet, many fear solitude. They fill their days with noise, their nights with distractions, their hearts with fleeting attachments that provide momentary relief but no lasting substance. They fear the quiet because in it they must face themselves. They jump from one relationship to another, never stopping to ask who they are when they stand alone. But a man who has stood in solitude and embraced it has no such fear. He does not run from himself. He knows his own mind, his own heart, his own purpose. There is a kind of wisdom that comes from walking alone. It teaches a man to rely on himself, to build his own foundations, to stand firm in his own beliefs. It teaches him that his value does not come from another person's affection, but from his own sense of self. And when a man understands this, he becomes unshakable. He is not swayed by rejection, nor is he desperate for acceptance. He moves through life with a sense of certainty, knowing that he is enough. The world is filled with men who have never known solitude, who have never spent time with only their own thoughts, who have never allowed themselves the space to grow without the influence of another. And because of this, they are forever seeking, forever grasping, forever looking outside themselves for something that can only be found within. But a man who has embraced solitude is different. He has looked inward, and in doing so, he has found strength. He does not see a relationship as the defining aspect of his existence. He does not believe that his life is incomplete without a partner. He does not fear growing old alone, for he knows that loneliness is not determined by the presence or absence of another, but by the relationship one has with oneself. A man at peace with himself is never truly alone. And what of passion? What of desire? These things do not fade in solitude, they are sharpened. A man who walks alone is a man who channels his energy into his craft, his purpose, his dreams. He does not waste his time on shallow pursuits. He invests it in something greater. He understands that passion is not something to be given away carelessly, but something to be directed with intention. To live without a girlfriend is not to live without love, it is to live without dependence. It is to recognize that love, when it is true, is not something to be chased, but something that arrives when one is already whole. It is to understand that the greatest love a man can have is the love he has for his own journey, his own growth, his own existence. And so, the man who walks alone does not do so with sadness nor with regret. He does not see himself as lacking, nor does he view his solitude as a failure. He sees it for what it truly is, a gift, a chance to build, a chance to explore, a chance to become something greater than he ever thought possible. There is a fire that burns in a man who does not fear solitude. It is the fire of purpose, of independence, of an unwavering belief in himself. It is a fire that does not dim with time, but only grows stronger. It is a fire that cannot be extinguished by loneliness, for it is fueled by something far greater, the knowledge that his life is his own to shape, his own to build, his own to live, fully and without apology. And so, the man who embraces solitude walks forward, not with hesitation but with purpose, not with longing but with certainty, not as a man in waiting but as a man in motion. And whether love comes or not, he will not falter, for he is already whole, he is already enough, he is already free. A man who embraces solitude does not do so out of bitterness nor out of rejection. He does not see himself as a victim of circumstance, nor does he allow others to define him by his lack of a partner. He does not move through life as though he is waiting for something to happen, as if his existence is in a state of pause until love arrives. No, he moves forward with intention, with clarity, with purpose. There is an immense power in a man who walks alone, not because he has been forced to, but because he has chosen to. The world tells him that love must be his goal, that his worth is measured by his ability to attract and keep a woman, that his time is best spent in pursuit of companionship, and yet he rejects this notion, not because he despises love, but because he understands something that many do not, that the greatest relationship a man can ever have is with himself. A man without a girlfriend is not a man without love. He is not a man without passion, without ambition, without warmth. He is not a man devoid of affection, nor is he incapable of deep and meaningful connections. But he does not chase, He does not pursue simply because the world tells him he must. He does not force what is not meant to be. Instead, he listens to himself, to the rhythm of his own life, to the quiet voice within him that tells him there is more to existence than the desperate search for romantic validation. To be alone is to be unshackled. It is to live free from the expectations of another, free from the compromises that slowly erode one's spirit, free from the weight of trying to be someone he is not in order to please someone else. He does not wake each morning wondering how to impress, how to gain attention, how to prove his worth to another. He wakes with a different kind of fire, a fire that burns not for approval, but for creation, for growth, for mastery. It is in solitude that a man discovers his true potential. It is in solitude that he learns the depth of his own mind, the strength of his own will, the vastness of his own possibilities. Without distraction, he can devote himself entirely to his craft, his ambitions, his vision for the future. He is not burdened by the need to check in, to explain himself, to justify his choices to another. His time is his own, his energy is his own, his life is his own. And yet, despite this, the world pities him. It looks at him with sympathy, with curiosity, with confusion. Why is he alone, they ask. Why has he not found someone? As if his solitude is something to be fixed, as if he is incomplete without another. But he does not seek to correct them, for he understands something they do not. He understands that solitude is not loneliness, but power. That to walk alone is not to walk in darkness, but to walk in clarity. That the path he has chosen is not one of absence, but one of fullness. A fullness that comes from knowing himself completely, from living without the need for constant validation, from moving through the world with unshakable purpose. A man who has mastered solitude does not fear being alone. He does not dread the night spent in his own company, nor does he look to another to provide him with a sense of self. He has built that self on his own, through discipline, through introspection, through an unwavering commitment to his own growth. He does not need someone to complete him, for he was never incomplete to begin with. He does not seek someone to rescue him from himself, for he is not lost. There is a kind of respect that follows a man who is at peace with himself. He does not demand attention, yet he commands it. He does not boast, yet his presence is felt. He does not chase, yet he is pursued, not because he is playing games, but because he has cultivated something rare, an existence that is full on its own. He is not looking to be saved, to be fixed, to be given meaning. He has already found meaning in the pursuit of his own excellence. And what of love? If it comes, it comes. But he does not seek it desperately, nor does he shape his life around the hope that it will arrive. He does not compromise himself for the sake of being accepted, nor does he mold his desires to fit into the expectations of another. He is open, but he is not waiting. He is receptive, but he is not reliant. He understands that true love is not something that can be forced, that it is not something to be pursued with reckless abandon, that it is not the defining measure of a life well lived. There is a quiet confidence in a man who does not need to be needed. He is not bitter about his solitude, nor does he resent those who have chosen a different path. He does not look upon couples with envy, nor does he feel as though he is missing something essential. He knows that his journey is his own, that his worth is not determined by whether or not someone stands beside him. He knows that happiness is not found in another person, but in the peace that comes from knowing oneself completely. A man who understands this does not fear the future. He does not worry about the passing years, about the expectations placed upon him, about the way others perceive his life. He does not measure his success by the standards of the world, but by the depth of his own fulfillment. He knows that true success is not found in the accumulation of relationships, but in the mastery of one's own existence. And yet so many live in fear of solitude. They grasp at relationships not because they are ready for love, but because they fear being alone. They settle for less, not because it fulfills them, but because they cannot bear the silence of their own company. They rush into commitments, not out of genuine desire, but out of desperation to avoid the discomfort of solitude. But a man who has embraced solitude does not live this way. He does not settle, he does not rush, he does not grasp. He understands that the greatest use of his time is not in chasing fleeting affections, but in building something lasting, whether it be his craft, his legacy, his knowledge, or his character. He does not allow his energy to be drained by meaningless pursuits, by relationships that do not serve him, by distractions that pull him away from his purpose. He guards his time, his focus, his vision, because he knows that these things are what truly shape a man. And in this he finds a kind of freedom that few will ever know. A freedom from need, from expectation, from the constant pull of external validation. He is not waiting for someone to choose him, to love him, to make him feel worthy. He has already chosen himself. He has already built a life that he loves, a mind that he respects, a future that he is proud to walk toward. And so he does not lament his solitude. He does not see it as a void, but as an opportunity to grow, to refine, to evolve. He does not see himself as unlucky in love, but as fortunate in self-discovery. He does not wonder what he is missing, but what he is gaining. For he knows that when a man is truly at peace with himself, when he has built a life that is rich in meaning, when he walks with purpose and lives with conviction, he is never truly alone. His solitude is not emptiness but abundance. His life is not lacking but full. He is not a man waiting to be completed. He is a man who is already whole. A man who walks alone walks with an understanding that few possess. He is not defined by what he lacks, but by what he has cultivated within himself. He does not measure his days by the presence of another, but by the progress he makes in his journey. He does not seek validation in the eyes of a lover, but in the depth of his own mind, in the strength of his own character, in the unwavering discipline that carries him forward. He is a man of patience, for he understands that solitude is not a burden but a season of refinement. While others seek distractions, filling their time with fleeting connections and hollow pursuits, he stands firm. He does not run from himself. He does not fear the quiet. He embraces it. Because he knows that within silence lies clarity. Within solitude lies transformation. To be alone is not to be forgotten. It is not to be invisible. It is not to be lesser. It is to be free from the need to explain, to please, to conform. It is to exist on one's own terms, to build a foundation that is unshakable, to rise without seeking permission. There is no greater strength than the strength of a man who has chosen himself, not out of arrogance, not out of defiance, but out of a deep and unshakable knowing that he is enough. The world may look at him and ask, where is his other half? As if a man is born incomplete, as if his existence is merely the prelude to a love story, as if his purpose is to find, to chase, to surrender. But he knows otherwise. He knows that a man's story is not measured by who walks beside him, but by the steps he takes alone. He knows that his worth is not determined by another's affection, but by the life he builds with his own hands. He does not waste time explaining himself. He does not seek to justify his path. He does not argue with those who cannot see what he sees. He simply moves with certainty, with direction, with the quiet assurance of a man who does not need approval. He does not seek to be understood because he understands himself. And what is a life lived in solitude if not a life lived on one's own terms? He wakes when he chooses, he moves as he pleases, he is the master of his own time, the keeper of his own ambitions. His energy is not spent navigating the expectations of another, nor is his purpose diluted by the need to accommodate. His thoughts are uninterrupted, his vision is undistorted, his focus is absolute. He does not seek love, but he does not reject it. He does not close his heart, but he does not depend on its fulfillment. He understands that love, when it comes, should complement, not complete. It should enhance, not consume. It should be an addition to an already full existence, not the foundation upon which his happiness is built. He is not waiting to be saved. He has already rescued himself. And yet, many will not understand. They will see his solitude as loneliness. They will mistake his independence for isolation. They will assume that he is missing something, simply because he does not seek what they seek. But he does not resent their misunderstandings. He does not waste time trying to change their minds. He simply lives in the fullness of his own truth, in the vastness of his own possibilities. The man who walks alone is not bound by expectation. He does not live to meet the standards of others. He does not alter himself to fit a mold. He does not silence his voice to appease. He does not shrink himself to accommodate. He has shed the need to be liked, the need to be desired, the need to be chosen. He has chosen himself, and that is enough. There is a fire in him that does not waver, a hunger that is not dulled by distraction, a vision that is not blurred by attachment. He is not cold, nor is he indifferent. He is simply unmoved by the notion that his existence is incomplete without another. He does not fear growing old alone, for he knows that true loneliness is not the absence of company, but the absence of purpose. And purpose, his purpose, is ever burning. He is the architect of his own fate, the author of his own story, the captain of his own course. He does not need another to give his life meaning, for he has already found it. He does not need a partner to give him direction, for his path is clear. He does not need to be loved to know that he is worthy, for his worth is not conditional. And what of those who cannot fathom a life without another? Those who believe that a man must always be in search, must always be pursuing, must always be defined by his ability to attract. He does not concern himself with them. Their beliefs do not shape his reality. Their expectations do not dictate his actions. He walks forward, undeterred, unconcerned, unshaken. A man who embraces solitude understands the richness of his own company. He is not burdened by the need to entertain, nor is he drained by the need to perform. He is free to think, to create, to wander, to build. His energy is directed inward, toward self-improvement, toward mastery, toward excellence. He is not distracted by the fleeting, nor does he waste himself on the meaningless. Every moment is his own, every step taken with intention. He does not fear love, nor does he reject companionship. But he does not define himself by it. He does not chase what is not meant for him. He does not shape his life around the prospect of finding someone. He lives fully, without apology, without hesitation, without the need to be anything other than who he is. And should love come, it will find him as he is, whole, unshaken, unwavering. It will not be the center of his world, but a part of it. It will not define him, but walk beside him. He will not surrender his solitude to it, nor will he lose himself in its presence. He will love, not because he needs to, but because he chooses to, and that is the difference. A man who understands the power of solitude does not seek completion. He does not long for something outside of himself to give his life meaning. He does not wait for love to make him feel alive, for he is already living. He does not fear the years ahead, for he knows that fulfillment is not found in another, but in the depths of his own mind, the vastness of his own soul, the endless possibilities that stretch before him. He moves through the world with a quiet certainty, a confidence that does not need to be declared, a strength that does not need to be proven. He is not searching, he is not longing, he is not waiting. He is. And that is enough. And so, the man who walks alone is not truly alone at all. He is not adrift, nor is he lost. He is not incomplete, nor is he waiting to be made whole. He is, in every sense, enough. His solitude is not an absence, but a presence of purpose, of strength, of unwavering self-awareness. He does not chase what is fleeting, nor does he measure his life by the expectations of others. He understands that fulfillment is not found in another, but in the mastery of his own existence. If love comes, it will not rescue him, for he was never in need of saving. It will not complete him, for he was never lacking. It will not define him, for he has already defined himself. He does not reject companionship, but he does not depend on it. His worth is not measured by who stands beside him, but by the depth of his own character, the clarity of his own mind, the fire of his own ambition. In the end, the man who embraces solitude does not live in emptiness, but in abundance. He does not fear walking alone, because in truth, he never truly walks alone. He walks with himself, and that is enough.